The late spring air hung heavy over the quiet streets of Seaford, Delaware. It was the kind of evening that carried the scent of blooming jasmine from nearby gardens and the distant hum of traffic along Route 13. On May 16, 2005, 17-year-old Olivia Monroe left her part-time job at the local diner just as the sun dipped behind the rooftops. With her paycheck tucked into her worn canvas purse, she began the short walk home, greeting neighbors along the way with her usual warmth. That evening would become the last time anyone saw Olivia alive. Olivia was the sort of teenager who seemed to radiate life. With shoulder-length chestnut hair, green eyes that sparkled in the sunlight, and an infectious laugh, she had the rare ability to make people feel noticed. She had dreams beyond the borders of Seaford, plans to study environmental science at the University of Delaware, and a determination to see the world beyond her small town. Her diary, later discovered untouched on her desk, documented meticulous entries about college applications, volunteer work at the local wildlife sanctuary, and fleeting crushes at school. Friends described her as thoughtful, driven, and unafraid to voice her opinions. Teachers admired her commitment to academics and extracurricular activities, from the school's science club to the debate team. That Monday started like any other. Olivia woke at 6:30 a.m., showered, and had cereal with her younger brother, Evan. Their mother, Corinne Monroe, remembered Olivia's cheerful demeanor, joking about her new work uniform at the diner. After school, she stayed late to help with inventory and cleaning before clocking out at 6:15 p.m. Security cameras at the diner captured her leaving promptly, waving goodbye to her coworkers. She appeared relaxed, laughing softly at something a colleague said, oblivious to the tragedy about to unfold. Olivia's route home was familiar. A straight three-quarter-mile walk past quiet streets, the local park, and a row of small shops. It was a route she had taken hundreds of times without incident. Yet on that evening, the ordinary became extraordinary. Surveillance from a nearby convenience store recorded a dark-colored sedan parked across the street, its engine idling, headlights dimmed. A man, appearing to be in his late 30s, lingered inside the car. Olivia, unaware, continued past, her purse swinging against her side. No one could have predicted that a single glance in the wrong direction would alter the course of so many lives. When Olivia failed to arrive home by 7:00 p.m., her mother grew concerned. By 7:30 p.m., Corinne called the diner to confirm her shift had ended. The staff confirmed she left on time, cheerful and in good spirits. Police were contacted shortly after 8:00 p.m., and a search began immediately. Neighbors scoured the nearby streets, calling her name, while officers examined the area around the diner and Olivia's usual path home. Within hours, it became clear that something far more sinister had occurred. The initial investigation focused on immediate possibilities: a runaway scenario, an accident, or a stranger abduction. Officers interviewed dozens of witnesses, scoured nearby alleys, and reviewed every surveillance camera along her route. A few reported seeing a dark sedan parked along Main Street around 6:20 p.m., but no one could recall the license plate. That night, the Seaford Police Department set up a command post in the town hall, coordinating searches with local volunteers, including the high school football team and community service groups. Search dogs were deployed the next morning, but their trails ended abruptly near a secluded back alley, suggesting Olivia had been intercepted by someone waiting for her. Days passed and hope began to dim. Flyers plastered every lamppost and storefront in town. Local news stations broadcast her face, desperate for any information. Tips flooded in, but each led to dead ends, false sightings, mistaken identities, or outdated leads. Olivia's family, desperate and exhausted, clung to memories of her laughter and letters she had written in the months before her disappearance. Her mother, Corinne, maintained a vigil by her bedroom window each night, unwilling to accept that her daughter was gone without a trace. Weeks into the investigation, detectives uncovered a clue that initially seemed insignificant: a partially smoked cigarette found in a nearby alley, collected as evidence but never fully analyzed due to the limitations of forensic technology at the time. At the time, DNA profiling was still emerging, and while the cigarette was preserved in an evidence locker, there was no immediate way to identify the perpetrator. It would sit there unnoticed for nearly a decade, waiting for the science to catch up with the case. Olivia's case became emblematic of the challenges facing law enforcement in small towns. Seaford, with its close-knit population, prided itself on knowing everyone's comings and goings, yet this familiarity could not prevent tragedy. Rumors swirled. Some speculated she had left voluntarily, others feared the worst. The unknown became a shadow over the town, prompting increased safety measures, neighborhood watches, and community meetings focused on protecting children from harm. But none of these measures could bring Olivia back, or provide the answers her family so desperately sought. As the years passed, the case remained unresolved. Investigators periodically revisited the evidence, hoping for a breakthrough, but technological limitations prevented them from advancing the investigation. Meanwhile, the community kept Olivia's memory alive through annual vigils, school memorials, and scholarships in her name. The partially smoked cigarette remained in the evidence room, a silent witness to the crime, its potential unrecognized but waiting. By 2015, nearly a decade after Olivia's disappearance, forensic science had advanced significantly. Techniques such as enhanced DNA extraction and touch DNA analysis offered new hope for cold cases. A new generation of investigators reviewed Seaford's old case files, searching for evidence that might yield a lead under these improved methodologies. Among the most promising items was the cigarette. Despite its age, it was a tangible connection to the night Olivia vanished. Investigators believed that modern testing could reveal the identity of the individual who had handled it, potentially cracking a case that had remained closed for 10 years. The renewed investigation, spearheaded by Detective Carla Whitman, focused on reanalyzing all preserved evidence using contemporary methods. DNA samples were carefully extracted, processed, and compared against national databases, both criminal and genealogical. The process was painstaking, with no guarantees of success, but Whitman's team approached it with determination, aware of the hope it represented for Olivia's family. Each step in the lab brought anticipation, every new result a potential turning point in a case that had long been defined by frustration and despair. The breakthrough came in early 2016. DNA recovered from the cigarette matched a profile in the National DNA Database. This unexpected match identified a previously unknown suspect, Robert Langley, a man with no prior violent criminal record but living in Delaware at the time of Olivia's disappearance. The revelation stunned the Seaford Police Department and the community at large. Langley's ordinary appearance, unremarkable life, and lack of prior offenses challenged assumptions about who could commit such a crime. It underscored the unsettling reality that perpetrators can hide in plain sight, blending seamlessly into small towns while harboring dangerous secrets. Detectives moved quickly, conducting surveillance and gathering additional evidence to corroborate the DNA findings. Discreet collection of discarded items, including coffee cups and personal belongings, confirmed Langley's genetic link to the cigarette and ultimately to Olivia's disappearance. The combination of modern forensic techniques and meticulous investigative work allowed authorities to build a case that could withstand legal scrutiny, bridging the gap between events of 2005 and the present day. The revelation rekindled intense emotions for Olivia's family. 10 years of uncertainty, grief, and unanswered questions had been replaced by a fragile sense of relief and anticipation. While the resolution could never undo the tragedy, it offered the possibility of accountability, justice, and emotional closure. For the town of Seaford, it marked a moment of reckoning, a reminder that even cases that seem frozen in time can be revived. that evidence preserved with care can ultimately illuminate truth, and that no disappearance is ever truly forgotten when persistence and science converge. With the identification of Robert Langley as a suspect, Seaford became a town on edge. News of the breakthrough traveled quickly through social media, local news, and word of mouth. For 10 years, residents had lived with unease, speculating about strangers and watching over their children with caution. Now the unease had a face. Langley, a quiet man in his early 40s, had been known around town as reserved but polite, someone who kept largely to himself. Few could reconcile the image of their neighbor with the violent crime suggested by the DNA evidence. Detectives Whitman and her team knew they had to act carefully. Langley's apparent normalcy meant that any overt move could alert him, potentially jeopardizing the investigation. Surveillance was set up around his home and workplace, documenting routines, movements, and interactions. Investigators were particularly focused on establishing connections between Langley and Olivia on the night of her disappearance. While the DNA evidence was compelling, they required additional corroboration to build a case strong enough for prosecution. Interviews with acquaintances and former colleagues painted a picture of a man who was socially distant, yet outwardly ordinary. Some described him as polite, if a bit awkward, someone who rarely participated in community events. Others noted that he often drove the same route as Olivia's path home from the diner, though at the time, nobody gave it much thought. These seemingly minor details became crucial pieces in the puzzle once investigators began to connect the dots. As detectives dug deeper into Langley's past, they discovered small inconsistencies in his statements about his whereabouts in 2005. He had claimed to have been at home on the evening of Olivia's disappearance, yet old phone records, delivery receipts, and traffic surveillance from nearby intersections suggested he may have been near the area where Olivia vanished. While these gaps alone were not conclusive, when paired with the DNA match, they became critical evidence in establishing his presence at the scene. Strengthen the case further, investigators revisited the evidence collected during the initial 2005 investigation. Items such as Olivia's purse, a torn piece of her jacket found in a nearby alley, and fingerprints on a discarded water bottle were re-examined. Although fingerprints did not match Langley, the DNA retrieved from the cigarette was consistent with traces found on Olivia's belongings. Modern forensic techniques allowed for more precise extraction and comparison than had been possible a decade earlier. Each piece of evidence pointed inexorably toward the same conclusion: Langley had been involved in Olivia's disappearance. The investigation also brought to light disturbing aspects of Langley's behavior that had gone unnoticed. He had a history of minor offenses, loitering, trespassing, and a few complaints regarding harassment, but nothing that would have predicted violent crime. Colleagues recalled that he sometimes made odd comments about observing people, though they were vague enough that they had not raised alarm. These details, while seemingly minor, gained significance in retrospect, adding texture to the picture of someone capable of calculating and premeditated actions. On the morning that warrants were issued, detectives prepared meticulously. Officers approached Langley's home quietly, ensuring minimal disruption to the neighborhood and reducing the chance of flight. When the door was knocked, he appeared surprised but composed. Detectives explained the situation, detailing the DNA match and the supporting evidence, and he was taken into custody without incident. The arrest sent ripples through Seaford. Neighbors who had once waved politely at him from across the street now struggled to reconcile the friendly man they knew with the person accused of taking Olivia from her family. Langley's initial reaction in custody was a mixture of shock and guarded silence. For days, he refused to speak about the events of 2005. Investigators, undeterred, relied on the overwhelming scientific evidence and careful interviews with witnesses to build a solid case. They coordinated with the Delaware State Police and prosecutors to ensure every procedural step was meticulously documented. The objective was clear: secure justice for Olivia while withstanding any challenge in court. Meanwhile, Olivia's family experienced a mixture of emotions: relief, grief, and cautious optimism. 10 years of unanswered questions had weighed heavily on them, creating a lingering sense of helplessness. Her mother, Corinne, described feeling a cautious hope, like waking from a long, restless dream. Her younger brother, Evan, now entering his 20s, found solace in the knowledge that someone was finally being held accountable, though the trauma of losing his sister would remain. Community members, friends, and classmates rallied around the family, offering support and acknowledging the strength it had taken to endure a decade of uncertainty. As prosecutors prepared the case, the strategy was to focus on the scientific evidence, timeline reconstruction, and behavioral patterns. Expert witnesses in forensic science were called upon to explain the DNA extraction and matching process, detailing how modern technology had finally uncovered the perpetrator. Investigators painstakingly walked through the sequence of events, from Olivia's last steps home to the discovery of the cigarette, to illustrate the meticulous nature of the investigation and the reliability of the evidence. Public interest in the trial grew steadily. Local news outlets covered every development, highlighting the intersection of science, persistence, and justice. Social media discussions often reflected a community grappling with relief and disbelief. Commentators noted the role of modern technology in resolving cases long considered unsolvable and highlighted the importance of preserving evidence, no matter how small or seemingly inconsequential. The story of Olivia Monroe became a symbol of hope for families still seeking answers for missing loved ones. Investigators also focused on preventing any re-traumatization of Olivia's family during the proceedings. Counselors and support groups were made available, providing guidance and emotional care as the trial approached. Police officers who had worked on the case for years remained in contact with the family, understanding that closure was more than a verdict. It was a gradual process of coming to terms with the past. During pre-trial hearings, defense attorneys attempted to challenge the DNA evidence, questioning the integrity of samples preserved for over a decade. Experts from both sides presented testimony on the reliability and accuracy of forensic methods. The prosecution countered with detailed explanations of chain-of-custody procedures, lab protocols, and the corroborating evidence linking Langley to Olivia's disappearance. By the time the trial began, the weight of evidence had created a formidable case, leaving few doubts about the likely outcome. As opening statements were delivered in court, the focus remained on truth and accountability. Prosecutors recounted Olivia's life, emphasizing her dreams, personality, and the void her absence had left in the community. The narrative was constructed not only to present facts, but to humanize Olivia, reminding everyone in the courtroom of the person behind the statistics and reports. Family members attended every day, their presence a testament to resilience and unwavering hope. The trial opened under the watchful eyes of Seaford and the surrounding counties. Courtrooms were filled with journalists, neighbors, and family members who had waited over a decade for justice. Olivia Monroe's disappearance had long faded from national headlines, but locally, it had remained a wound that refused to heal. Now, the evidence collected, preserved, and painstakingly analyzed over 10 years was finally being presented in full. Prosecutor Danielle Ford emphasized the meticulous work of the investigators, the breakthrough provided by DNA, and the unbroken trail of evidence linking Robert Langley to Olivia's last known movements. The courtroom fell silent as the DNA match was explained in detail. Experts described the advanced testing techniques that had allowed even a degraded sample from a cigarette butt to provide a definitive identification. Each explanation reminded those present of the relentless patience and precision required to solve cold cases. Witnesses came forward to recount the events of 2005, piecing together a timeline that placed Langley in proximity to Olivia on the day she disappeared. Surveillance footage, phone records, and traffic camera data were analyzed and shown, painting a picture of a calculated sequence of events. Langley's pattern of behavior, once dismissed as ordinary, was now seen through the lens of modern investigation. People who had once known him as quiet and polite were confronted with the chilling realization that outward normalcy had masked criminal intent. The defense attempted to discredit the DNA evidence, suggesting contamination or mishandling. They questioned witnesses, lab procedures, and chain-of-custody records, attempting to create doubt. However, the prosecution countered with meticulous documentation, expert testimony, and a detailed reconstruction of investigative steps. Each objection was met with clear explanations, reinforcing the credibility of the findings. After days of testimony, the case against Langley remained unshakable. For Olivia's family, the proceedings were both excruciating and cathartic. Corinne Monroe, her mother, described a mix of emotions: relief that the person responsible had been identified, grief at the long-delayed confrontation with the truth, and a quiet hope that justice would finally provide closure. Her younger brother, Evan, reflected on how years of uncertainty had shaped his life, leaving scars that would never fully heal, but also a deep appreciation for the determination of those who refused to give up on his sister. Community members attended daily, offering support and witnessing the legal process that validated years of collective hope. During cross-examination, Langley's demeanor shifted between defiance and silent withdrawal. He attempted to minimize his actions and maintain the guise of an ordinary citizen. Prosecutors, however, highlighted inconsistencies in his statements over the years and his attempts to blend into the community while maintaining secrets. The contrast between his public persona and the crime he committed became a focal point, emphasizing the chilling reality that predators can hide in plain sight. Trial reached its climax when the prosecution presented evidence from the cigarette butt itself, alongside other corroborating DNA found on Olivia's personal belongings and at key locations along her route home. Forensic experts explained how even minute biological material, preserved correctly, could yield conclusive identification. The jury listened intently, fully aware that the case relied on modern science to pierce through a decade of uncertainty. Every carefully presented fact built toward the inescapable conclusion: Robert Langley had been responsible for Olivia's disappearance. After weeks of testimony, closing arguments were delivered. Prosecutor Ford emphasized the persistence of investigators, the resilience of Olivia's family, and the power of science in bringing long-overdue justice. Defense counsel appealed to the jury's compassion, arguing that Langley had lived a relatively quiet life since 2005, but their argument could not overcome the overwhelming evidence. The case had become more than a legal battle. It was a narrative of truth prevailing against years of mystery and fear. Jury retired to deliberate, and in the tense hours that followed, the community waited with bated breath. For 10 years, the question of accountability had hung over Seaford, shaping conversations, routines, and the collective psyche. The verdict would either close a painful chapter or leave lingering doubt. When the jury returned, their decision was unanimous. Robert Langley was found guilty of the abduction and murder of Olivia Monroe. Relief, grief, and validation washed over the courtroom simultaneously. For Olivia's family, the verdict marked the beginning of healing after a decade of waiting, not an end to the emotional journey. Sentencing followed swiftly. The judge, acknowledging the prolonged impact of the crime on the community and the family, delivered a sentence of life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Her words were measured but firm, recognizing both the calculated cruelty of the crime and the courage of those who had pursued justice relentlessly. Outside the courthouse, supporters of the Monroe family gathered, some holding candles, others embracing quietly, collectively acknowledging the closure that had been decades in coming. Seaford, though forever altered by the events of 2005, began a slow process of recovery. Local authorities invested in community awareness programs and support for families affected by similar tragedies. The case became an example of the critical importance of preserving evidence, the evolution of forensic science, and the persistence of dedicated investigators. Discussions in schools and community centers highlighted how modern techniques like DNA re-examination could provide answers long after initial investigations had gone cold. Olivia's family took deliberate steps to honor her memory and ensure her story continued to inspire. Scholarships in her name were established for students pursuing forensic science, criminal justice, and social advocacy. Her mother and brother became active in local initiatives supporting missing persons, advocating for awareness, funding, and resources to prevent similar prolonged suffering for others. In their work, they transformed personal grief into a force for communal protection and vigilance. The law enforcement team, the case served as both a professional achievement and a reminder of the enduring power of science and persistence. Detectives Whitman and Morales, along with the forensic specialist, continued to speak publicly about the case, emphasizing lessons learned, the importance of evidence preservation, and the revolutionary impact of DNA technology in resolving cold cases. Their message resonated nationwide, influencing protocols, training, and investigative priorities. In the years following Langley's conviction, Seaford slowly reclaimed a sense of security. The community's vigilance, combined with a renewed trust in scientific methods, helped restore faith that justice, while sometimes delayed, remained achievable. Olivia Monroe's disappearance, once a source of profound uncertainty, became a testament to the value of persistence, science, and unyielding dedication to truth. Her memory continued to guide the town, inspiring future generations to recognize that even decades-old mysteries can be solved, and that the voices of victims can finally be heard. Olivia's story, once frozen in 2005, now echoes with clarity, that no crime, however hidden or delayed, can remain shrouded forever. The work of investigators, the bravery of her family, and the advancements in forensic science ensured that her life mattered, her story was told, and her community could finally find peace. For those still searching for lost loved ones, Olivia's case serves as proof that patience, perseverance, and modern science can converge to provide answers, closure, and a measure of justice, no matter how much time has passed.